Hello and welcome back to WAAAGH Tactics. Today we're here to talk about orc characters not to miss out on. Well, not to overlook. So today we're going to discuss orc characters that are usually a bit overlooked, maybe underappreciated until it's time for them to shine in the meta. We're going to give, their current status in the meta, but also some anecdotal remembrances of what they used to be like in the past. So if you have any of history on these models that we go through today, make sure that you show it out there for any of the old new player bases to kind of learn about this orc lore in the game as well, because we all know it was wacky back in the day. But what's it doing now, and what can you do with your current collection instead of always hearing, "Hey, war bosses are awesome if you bring 3." So today we're discuss several units and have fun with it, but also be informed today. We're with the creative WAAAGH energy and the new rules we have access to. But of course, let's give a shout out to today's sponsors, the Baron of Dice, as the Baron of Dice allows us to our paying competition. So check them out in the description for 5% off, because everybody loves their high quality dice and they are supporting the channel. So 5% off because nobody likes taxes. And shout out to the Baron of Dice. So of course, let's start with the big mech with shock attack gun. May be a little controversy because you guys know currently in the meta there's actually quite competitive data sheet. But the reason why I say it's a bit forgotten in the meta is because it's great until it's forgotten and nobody cares. Because what I'm going to show you right now is boom, data sheet. If you're looking at the screen, which is the 8th edition data sheet for the Big Mech with shock attack gun. So before, what it used to do is if you read the abilities, and as it says, is that if you rolled for its strength, you had to roll 2d6, and if you rolled an 11 or higher, any hit roll automatically translated to D3 mortal wounds. So if you got 5 hits, that'd be 5 D3 mortals on top of any of the damage you did behind that. Not including the data, the detachment rules you had for re-rolling and sustained or whatever you had back in the day. But that was 8th edition, right? So then you could think maybe even 2 years past that people have brought these things and don't remember him. Then bam, we get a new data sheet and he's back on the menu. Before that, it was only Ludas and Dreadmob, right? So there's a bunch of data sheets like that that we're going to go over today that are going to be similar to that, but they're awesome here. But they've been have awesome plays in the future as well. I mean, in the past as well. So make sure you shout it out in the comments. I'm sure this will be a fun long lore video as well as informative one. So currently in the meta, what do they do? One thing here is the 2 back-to-back units that we're going to talk about. Combos are the shock attack gun plus 10 Ludas in comparison to shock attack gun plus tank busters. Now, I have videos that are discussing these in depth, but all in all, what's great about the Ludas is that they have 48-inch range. They have more volume of shots overall, and they're a bit more available to the current orc player base as of the current meta, how it's going. Great in Dread Bomb because they have access to the button with they have the shock attack gun on there, so they can get sustained or lethal. And then they get rerolls to hit innately if you're in on the objective. We absolutely appreciate that as orc players. They can jump out of transports and get onto small buildings. If they disembark onto the top ruin, they can end up getting plunging fire possibly. They could come in from reserve. You can walk out from buildings. There's a bunch of different ways that you can lose Ludas and appreciate them. And shock attack gun gains a benefit as well for getting the buffs that they get for being in Dread Mob. If you're playing the tactical brigade detachment with the Ludas and the shock attack gun, you take the orders for +1 to hit. Hitting on 5s is about equal to sustain. It makes your shock attack gun hit on 4s. That's quite something valuable that we appreciate as well. But here we have the tank busters, where the tank busters have something like the pulsar rocket, where it actually takes the shock attack gun to a strength 10, takes the rockets to strength 10 for once in the game for one shooting phase. And then you also have the tank buster data sheet for +1 to hit, +1 to wound. Now, this makes it great in Dread Mob or in the Tactics Brigade, either or. And that's because in the Dread Mob, obviously you can get sustained or lethal. He still gets rerolls of 1s to hit. So you can make this, statistically end up hitting on 3s. Great value there. And then in the Tactics Brigade, you can actually give them +1 to hit. So when they're shooting against infantry, you actually have these rockets going against infantry. So Terminators, T5, 3 wound infantry is getting wounded on 2s, -3 AP from the rockets themselves, their blast. So look more into that if you're playing that detachment. And then last but not least, the shock attack gun plus flash kits in the mech enhancement if you're playing the Tactics Brigade. So say that you don't have other characters we're going to talk about, or if you looked at that detachment, the shock attack gun's very valuable with that enhancement as well. He's a bit cheaper than the alternative, and he gets the full rerolls to hit. When the flash kits pop the ammo run, he does get lethal from that as well. Keep in mind, he's always making the enemy take battle shock when he hits them. We usually forget about that as Ork characters, but he's a great addition to any Ork collection. He's sometimes harder to get than others. He's currently 65 points, which is quite cheap. GW dropped him in cost before. We'll see what happens in the future if he keeps that cost where he's at now. So of course, if you want more info on this, we have other videos with these detachments, but this is just one of the hints for why you don't forget about these gets, because we all know that these guys have been around for a while. Another person that's been around for a while and other appreciated is the Deffkilla wartrike. So he's the only source of advanced auto 6 in the Ork Codex. Super underappreciated, and now that the fact that we have the new WAAAGH, it means that he can actually appreciate the new WAAAGH changes, right? Auto advancing 6 on your terms when you want, so you can get stuck in, feels really good. But I actually like that with the new detachment, so we'll talk about that in a second. One thing to keep in mind is that he's the only true Speed Freaks character. They got rid of our war boss on bike. We absolutely hate that. GW, what are you doing? Hook us up. You got rid of Zag's truck. I was hoping he'd be a speed freak. Instead, you threw him in the trash. What's going on there? Right here in little letters, you can see I put war for the freebooters. Because one thing to keep in mind here is, like I said about the shock attack gun, the Deffkilla wartrike has been a bully in the meta in the past. Everybody knows about the freebooters 9th edition, where you would get +1 to hit on your Ork buggies. He actually would be able to get an enhancement where I believe he would give reroll once to wound or something, and is an aura. So he was, like I said, the only speed freak character. So really, he would get an enhancement, any buffs whenever buggies, spikes, stuff like that's going to be strong. There's a good chance that the Deffkilla wartrike is going to be strong as well. With that being said, he's auto-clued for Cult of Speed as is. Cult of Speed has its own weakness, but hey, that's what it is. He's really nice that you can do reactive moves in that detachment. You can pop an invuln for your unit on that detachment. He can get +1 to wound when he charges in that detachment. He can shoot, in charge. So that feels pretty nice. If you could bring 3, it feels better. In the Tactics Brigade, of course, the fact that he can actually give orders is awesome. So he can end up giving your bikers +1 strength. They can give themselves sustain and cover and cover and stealth, and then you can pop a CP for sustain or lethal. You can end up giving them more OC in that detachment if you get stuck in combat, which this guy usually does. He has a nice OC of 3 already, so going up to 4 to offset enemy transports and vehicles and wins and contest those, and Windows contesting is pretty awesome, pretty crazy. It helps with the fact that he's not really killing, so he could run into like a battle line unit, kill 3 intercessors and then 2 alive, pop the CP, he ties with them, boom, things go his way. That's pretty cool. We also have Super Cyborg Body on the War Horde detachment. So we know that we don't have access to Feel No Pain anymore because of Mazrock's Scrag Bag. You can go ahead and throw this on your Beast Boss on Squigosaur. Keep in mind on this list, we're not going to have any Snagga units because we have a whole video on Snaggas themselves. So they already got all their own love. But speaking of the Squigosaur, is that he already has a 5-up. So you're paying the CP, the points just to give him an additional 1 on the Feel No Pain. No, go ahead. Yeah, pay 15 points, give it to the 80-point trike. He has 9 wounds. Getting 4 at Feel No Pain is freaking awesome. And he's just a great addition to any let's say beginner entry Ork player army collection. Great money and points value. In that case, you can actually really appreciate him and give him a 10 out of 10 for anybody who's beginner or intermediate player, and his current state in the meta, quite playable. I'd really like to see people try to get him going more in the Tactics Brigade, right? And shout out to Brandon. Whoa, for the Deffkilla wartrike. Then we move on to Boss Snikrot. So Boss Snikrot is one of a kind. What do I mean by that? So Boss Snikrot actually has the ability to, what we call uppy downy or redeploy but his is a bit more at will. So other people, it might be at the end of your opponent's fight phase, or at the end of your opponent's turn, or in the beginning of the command phase, something like that. In snikrot, it's in the movement phase, just during the movement phase, not the end, not the start, just during the movement phase. He can just pick himself up and move him around. That's really cool in the new detachment of Tactics Brigade, because he can actually be picked up and redeployed somewhere. And when how the rules are written, when he gets redeployed somewhere, he gets to give an order. Now, keep in mind, if he already gave an order in the command phase, he cannot do it again. So it's still only once. Don't give it away if you're trying to do this. But just know that because of how it's worded, it means you can put him preemptively or following behind whatever you're trying to give an order to, jump out, yell at him, and then tell him I'll do something. So that's pretty sick. And then in that case, he's one of a kind. He's really good for scoring secondaries in that case. He's a lone op. He's our only true lone op based off, what he can actually do. So we greatly appreciate that. He didn't have that before. He works in any detachment, but he does favor a bit of skewless. Now, he does lead commandos. I don't advise ever giving him the ability to leave commandos. Don't stick them together. It's not worth it in point value. Infiltration is king, but not always needed. Now, when I mean it's not always needed is you don't always have to throw Snikrot away and let him die early, or leave him on an island to die early. Sometimes you can just put him in your deployment zone deep in a corner, maybe in a corner of no man's land, somewhere safe where he'll not be attacked, and he can do secondaries for you there. And then pick him up later in the game and send him into the backfield, and people kind of forget about him. The action dies down if you're worried about him being killed early. But I do advise that you practice with him if you want, especially if you're playing things, like I said, some kind of skewless. Now, what I mean by skewless, you're playing Green Tide, a lot of mobs of boys. Boys have a hard time doing secondaries. You're playing elite armies, and you run out of guys to do action monkeys for you. But keep in mind, there are armies that can drop within 6 and end up still annihilating him, even though he's a lone op. So it's easier said than done. People can advance and shoot. So you do have to keep in mind that he wants to be kind of terrain hopping best he can. He can go inside, assist with the mech wall if you're running Gorkanauts, Morkanauts, Stompos, Killicans, a bunch of trucks with Ludas and flash kits, or a bunch of trucks with melee potential army units. There's a chance that you just have Snikrot on your list, so he can stick around and just do secondaries for you while you saturate the table with threats. He is really cool at fighting with his twin linked. He has precision. It's just hard to kind of get him where you need him to get. A lot of times he really doesn't end up fighting, but what he does end up doing is become available to secret missions. So a bit more nuanced as well. He is a bit more of an intermediate player. You can tell based on how I'm describing what he does. The fact that he has secret missions means you preemptively have to try to get a secret mission off by getting him to enemy's deployment zone, and actually trying to get the warlord secret mission off and take their objective, which is pretty hardcore. So as of his current status, I think he's a bit overcosted for 95 points. But he does really help in the detachments where you just are playing for a lot of big bricks and you don't have durable stuff as an orc unit. Typically, let's say you play in a shooting heavy meta, or in a not maybe terrain lacking setup, you'll really appreciate Snikrot, and a lot of competitive players end up using him. Shout out to Boss Snikrot. Plus, he got a new model, so love Boss Snikrot. And then we move on to the Big Mech and Mega Armor. Someone I actually greatly appreciate. I actually had to pull up his data sheet ability straight up on here because it's quite extensive. So this guy has great detachment flexibility. He can end up being on bully boys. I've seen people trip him out where you bring 3 of them. The fact that he ends up giving the 4-up invuln to mega knobs, and he actually allows you to regenerate one of them, and then once per game you can heal one of them. Means that if you just bring bully boy saturation where the mega knobs already have the keyword, they don't need a war boss with them to do reroll hits or to get the second wall, means that they can simply just live off that ability of the 4-up invuln throughout the game as they continue to push forward. Quite awesome and versatile. The Big Mech and Mega Armor can also go in Tactics Brigade. You could, of course, stick them with the war boss and let them get stuck in. They have the ability to fall back and charge, since they can do that in this detachment for 1 CP. Reroll charges, all the typical stuff. They cannot get stealth, which is sad. But one thing the Big Mech and Mega Armor can do is get the mech enhancement and be attached to 10 flash kits. That's absolutely my favorite way to run that enhancement. highly valuable in that way. And in that way, it's pretty great if you only have one of those guys, such as myself, for example, on one Bimac and Mega Armor, as it's a bit pricey to get him per point for money wise, right? Is a in a box. So he goes with 10 flash kits, great points per value model in killing and Overwatch and how you play that detachment. And then in Dread Mob as well, you can give him Smoky Gubbin enhancement, so he's -1 hit in shooting. He can press the button for the Mega Knobs that he's leading there as well. Playing as a enemy soaking kind of unit, you can even tiptoe him one of the models outside of a terrain, let the enemy shoot him, and then you regen someone back forward where you want him to actually be when it's time to regen him. It's the best anvil type of unit that orcs have. We don't really have anything that typically wants to, try to tank some enemy shooting or soak up firepower. In this case, this is the closest thing we got to that. 4-up invuln is almost unheard of for orcs. Even if it's at range, then you get to regen guys. It's awesome. The fact that he was typically overlooked was because he was costed much higher, about 20 points more than the war boss. The fact that he's now equally 90 points with the war boss means that he's a bit more able to be looked at. And that's something I've always said. You need to make him either the same or, even this guy maybe even lower than a war boss. One thing that he does lack is the offensive output. So he really does fight like just imagine a knob in power armor, because he's only 3 attacks with his power claw and 2 attacks with his kill saw. That's something he really lacks. He does have a gun, his custom Mega Blaster, strength 9, 3 shots. Its hazard is -2 d6 damage. It can do damage. Like you said, you could reroll hit rolls of 1, but don't typically rely on that. One thing is that he himself is a bit more durable than you would expect. Actually having a 2-up armor save for an orc unit and a handful of wounds feels pretty good. He actually takes some saves. So this guy is typically over foreshadowed and look. Getting one of them in your collection for moments like when something like Tactics Brigade will take you a long way. Helping them in your bully boys. That way you have something that actually survives a little bit. Will help you as you become a more versatile and expansive player in your orc collection. And maybe you have a bit too many Mega Knobs anyways. Maybe you're a creative git you can build with your own. And then we move on. So now we move on to another new git, the Big Mech. So the Big Mech is a new model, new data sheet. Love this guy. He looks fantastic. He makes the orcs look amazing in the future. Our future looks bright. Our future looks amazing because how tall and kind of, how would you say, really textured, creative, in-depth, and kind of grindy he looks. Like his arm, if you look at his arm that has the actual shock cannon, it's actually like a cybernetic arm within the flesh. He's really making us feel like he's diverse as well with how he's actually be played. So he's actually a really unique data sheet ability as well as how he looks. Some people would say he's Primaris. You could think he's kind of a bit more Primaris, but orcs as a whole should kind of look a little bit bigger, I think. So as for so does Marines, but he's a new data sheet. So as a Big Mech, yes, but the old Big Mech, he was just a data sheet without an actual model. So it's kind of like a new, but then we hadn't actually had a Big Mech for a long time. Chat, I see you. So that being said, as for his unique data sheet abilities, he can actually pass through terrain, like buildings, when he's attached to units. So he can take mech guns and actually lead them through walls. He can walk through enemy units as well. So he can actually walk through screening models, which is actually very unique for us, and it gives us to reroll advances. Now, he can't charge through screens. That'd be amazing, but he actually cannot do that. A couple ways that it actually becomes pretty interesting is, one, in Warhorde, he becomes more mobile. You can give him follow me, lad, so he just innately has +2 movement, and then you can here we go him so he can make longer charges and longer advances. That is pretty crazy when you think about how much he can get down the field with maybe a unit of knobs being attached to him and actually move through enemy screens and then get charged and get stuck in. He does have flat 3 damage in combat as well. So that's pretty sick with his Drilla. Also in Dread Mob, he has a good amount of stacking buffs. Now, he might be overlooked by that. You think, oh, he's just pressing the button for maybe some boys and letting them shoot some guns. Or but of course, like we spoke about, he could do mech guns where he can help mech guns jump through terrain, get lines of sight that they typically would never be able to get because those guys barely are able to move with 3 inches. But what's actually really cool about this button synergy is actually goes good with the new Breaker Boys. So how it goes good with the new Breaker Boys is they have critical anti monster 4+. So something like Knuckle Buster going with your Big Mech means that your Knuckle Buster can get AP -3 by choosing the additional AP one on 4+. So if you want Knuckle Busters that are kind of just getting up there with good AP and Twinling, that could be pretty crazy. And they can obviously do everything with sustain and lethal, so they appreciate that too. He appreciates have them. They're a smaller unit, so they're more likely to actually pass through someone fully. And then Bully Boys, seeing that in Bully Boys, where you bring 20-man units of boys and a war boss, and then a couple big mechs. They jump out of a truck, they pass through enemy screens, and when they're trying to outline maybe terrain walls so you can't pass through the terrain, straight up jump right through that. Absolutely amazing in Bully Boys. When you have double wall, you just continue momentum. Just keep in mind, he's really cool because he can lead mobs of boys. He can lead elite infantry orc units like knobs, breaker boys, or he can lead DAKA units. Like you can give him a 20-man unit of boys. You can give him to a mech guns and line up some DAKA mobs. So that's pretty sick and something that shouldn't be overlooked. Check out other videos if you haven't seen that in the past with Dread Mob and these detachments that we talked about. We've covered him extensively to a degree as well. And then we move on. And keep in mind, we've covered everything in here before in the detachments. So this is kind of like a reminder, check-in for everybody who's new, trying to catch up on what they own. Just give it a look throughout in our playlist and such. So something we have here is the Painboy. So the Painboy has been, very interesting for a while in our codex, as he, goes up and down in points. Currently, he's 80 points. I think that's a big overprice, just a little bit. Now, I'm not saying he's not worth his current point value. I'm just saying for a 3-wound T5, no invuln, I believe, model, he's only 80 points. He's like the easiest precision in all of 40K. He's most valuable per point. Of course, he has a feel no pain, but still, it's quite crazy. He means he has 4 wounds. That sucks. But what's good about him is that he's synonymous with the green tide. Now, I do mean like green tide as in the detachment, but he's also synonymous green tide as in mobs of boys, the ability to regen models. It does only once per game, but it is known to be able to do that, which matters when it matters. He is a good war boss substitute. So typically you wouldn't think about that because he's a Painboy, like a medic, but he's actually a pretty solid war boss substitute. If you don't have 3, they're pretty hard to get, and you have some left over Painboys, he goes good on your knobs, your breaker boy units, giving your knobs the ability to get back up. When there's 10 of them, you have 10 in your unit. They have a 5-up invuln. He gives them a 5-up feel no pain. The chance that, say, you're running them in Warhorde where you can put hardest nails on them, so they're -1 to wound. In that case, that's a pretty durable 10-man unit of knobs, to the degree that knobs can be durable. And then he can pick up D3 after that. So pretty amazing in that case. Breaker boys can get a little bit of value from him as well. He also is the backbone of the pain wall. So if you want to saturate the table with 5-up feel no pains, of course you can throw in Snagas to assist in that. But the Painboy is the only way to really kind of tech into a pain wall, which is usually interesting in the Bully Boys attachment. So if you're trying to play those guys in their own attachments, and outside of just playing with mobs, that's a good way to do it as well. One thing to keep in mind here is that the Painboy is not really that available to all you older orc gets or people that have been collecting for a while. He used to be a part of what was the Combat Patrol, the starting collecting force before, where you can get a Painboy quite easily. That's how I got 3, for example. But it's not that way to get them anymore. So be happy that you got them. And if you have 1 or a couple, get them stuck in. I appreciate what they are, as they're quite valuable now. And, maybe they'll get Primaris up, but as they are right now, this is why we're doing videos like this. You can appreciate what they is. But the one thing about them that I want to point out is the synergy in almost every detachment within a boy mob that they have. Now, what I mean by that is that you can run a boy, war boss, and Painboy in Warhorde, Dread Mob, Tactics Brigade, Cult of Speed, whatever you really feel like playing it in, Bully Boys, whatever you feel like playing it in, and it will have its play. Especially if you're really used to playing mobs of boys. It's really fundamental to being an orc player, to having just a big unit of boys with OC, flipping objectives, tagging multiple enemy units, move blocking, getting the most out of an orc green mob tide unit or boy unit. So Painboy is really player expression, And I do value, just if you have one, start playing with them, get some good reps in. It really means a lot. Now, the big cherry on top of a Painboy is his dirty syringe. So his dirty syringe, essentially. I want to explain this for any newer players. So the dirty syringe is a weapon that he gets. It's extra attack, so it's simply one attack. It hits on threes, anti-infantry 4+. But it is a precision weapon. If you reattach ability, which is pretty weird how it's done, the abilities on the side and then the weapons are going to be confusing. But as is written, is when you stab a critical wound with this early syringe, as long as it's not a vehicle. So a infantry would be the critical wound typically, or and mounted in other cases if you rolled a 6. But in infantry cases, you would now that enemy would suffer d6 mortal wounds. So if you walk up to a Space Marine lieutenant and you stab him on a 3+, and then you roll a 4+ and you land a 4, roll a 4, then he will take d6 mortal wounds. You roll a 6 because power of Gork and Mork, and then he'll be early syringe down and die, and that'd be fantastic. So that's how that works. That's another really cool factor about him, is he kind of gives you a free precisions tab, free attempt on that. That's another good thing about the war boss, because he hits on a 2+ in that case, as he makes it a 2+ instead of a 3+ swing, and then a 4+. So imagine in this case, it's on a 2+, you on a 2+, you're allowed to roll again, and on a 4+, you get DC 6 mortal wounds on a character. That's an easy way to award it. That's pretty sick. Yeah, and imagine if it's Warhorde or Sustain, then you get a 6, and then you can have more of those. You can get pretty out of hand. So a lot of people love this ability, and that's how it works. Painboy is pretty awesome. Shouldn't be slept on. And we move on to last, but certainly not least of this list, we have the Weirdboy. So we have the jump, hit or miss, right? You let me know in chats what you guys think. I've had some great game-winning events, where the Weirdboy jumped up into the backfield and got me the enemy's home field, and then I've had where he just blows up and kills 3 boys in his unit and stands still and then gets shot to pieces. You let me know what you feel about it. And then, so the big thing about the boy is that the Weirdboy is his role versatility. So what I mean by that, it's what do you feel like doing with him as the player based off what detachment you're playing and what buffs you're giving him. For example, Warhorde. So in Warhorde, you can choose to play him like a lone op, ? That meaning you could run him just by himself, give him a 4+, feel no pain. So super cyborg body. That way, if he blows himself up, he's more likely to survive. Then he can run around doing secondaries for you, which you could totally do, and that's fine. Or you can stick him on a boy unit, a knob unit, whatever it may be. Pop Here We Go on him. That way he can actually get a 7-inch charge off, and you pop a CP so you can re-roll that and get kind of stuck in. That could be pretty fun if you're that kind of player. You can be in Tactics Brigade, where you can end up taking a unit that you've given stealth, and you've pretty much attempted the same thing. Maybe it'd be a charge. Or if you're a really cunning get like Mark Perry, check out that video, where you actually give them all shooter boys, you give them an order for stealth, and you give them +1 to hit for the shooter boys. They jump. You try to headbang someone, shout out to Brandon, and you try to headbang a character with the Weirdboy, and your unit shoots its rockets and its DACA and takes position in the mid-table. Totally can play that way with the Weirdboy and his to jump if you're trying to play just for positioning. And of course, we've seen him in Bully Boys or other detachments where he plays for the secret mission, where you stick a 10-man unit of him, boys on him, and you use him to screen your backfield and then jump to the enemy backfield, do a secret mission to get battle line into enemy deployment zone. So he can be played in a versatile way where you can use him offensively, you can use him defensively for board presence and control, where you're not really even trying to get a charge off, trying to take up space, or you can use him in a way where he's just running around doing secondaries for you. He's currently 65 points. He used to be 55, which was a steal. I wish GW would have made him like 60, but it is what it is. So what do you think? Weirdboy, hit or miss, the jump, ad banging, everything we do. What do you guys think what it's all about? And as for the Weirdboy, can we get a war for the Weirdboy? And with that being said, do you have any Ork characters that you want to miss, that you feel like we missed out on this list? So, of course, we didn't want to cover Snaggers because we already have Snaggers. And this was meant to be a recap, quick guide, quick tips kind of video to get you guys stuck in and remembering what is being used, what can be used with our variety of data sheet changes, detachment additions, new data sheets. So Ork players be happy. We have versatility, we have strength in our numbers, and when I mean numbers, I don't even mean our models. I mean the fact that you have so many detachments that are available to be played that you can just come to the table and really catch your enemy off guard. So really, just stick to what you got that you already have owned. Don't get saturated in meta chasing or FOMO. Stick to WAAAGH tactics. We'll help you out with what you got to get the most out of your cunning get tactics. So with that being said, there's only one thing to keep in mind. Is don't cross our wall, because we'll knock your teeth out. Whoa!